Good evening and welcome to the City of Dublin Architectural Review Board meeting. This meeting is being live streamed. You can access a video of this meeting or future meetings on the city's website. For anyone who is watching, this meeting is being held at 5555 Perimeter Drive at the City Council chambers. The procedure for our meeting this evening, the case will be introduced by a staff member. There'll be a brief staff presentation. Applicants will have an opportunity then to make a presentation. Board members will then ask clarifying questions of staff and applicants. We'll then ask for any public comment if there are individuals here who would like to speak to specific cases. And then the board will deliberate and provide either a decision or feedback on a particular project. We start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would rise and face the flag. Judy, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Cotter.
Here.
Ms. Damasser. And Ms. Cooper and Mr. Joel are absent.
Okay, thank you. We don't have, as you've probably seen from the agenda, we don't have minutes prepared yet from the January meeting, but we have other documents that we can accept. So is there a motion to accept the documents?
I'll move to accept the documents.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Ms. Damasser.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Our board is responsible for the review of construction and modifications or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under the zoning code section 153.170. There are no cases eligible for the consent agenda this evening. We do have the decision-making responsibility on the cases that come before us. Anyone who tends to address the board on cases this evening, you must be sworn in. So if you intend to address us, please raise your right hand and affirm and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony this evening? Okay, thank you. Okay. Our first case is 114 South High Street. It is a minor project review. The application is a request for exterior modifications to the building on a 0.2 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is located approximately 85 feet southeast of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane with South High Street. Ms. Mullinex will be our presenter. So Taylor, whenever you're ready.
Thank you and good evening. This is a request for review and approval of a minor project review for exterior modifications, including landscaping, screening, and a new stone tread at the front door located at 114 South High. The 0.2 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and is located southeast of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane and South High Street. The property is zoned Historic District, Historic South, and is surrounded by businesses to the north, the south, and west, and single-family homes to the east. The existing commercial building was built in 1948 in the colonial revival style and was the office of Dr. Harry Carr. The building is recommended contributing to the Historic District as mentioned in the Historic and Cultural Assessment. And the image here shows existing conditions before the exterior modifications began in 2022. The last application before the ARB was in November of 2022, where a minor project review was approved for deck modifications and window replacements. A condition of approval from that application required the applicant to provide erosion and sedimentation control measures for the site after the landscaping was removed. And you will see that in the existing conditions photos in the next few slides. So these are the existing conditions of the west and north elevations. The site continues to be under construction to incorporate approved building modifications. The existing landscaping and front door stoop were removed prior to approval, and this request will bring the property back into compliance. And the approved deck has yet to be constructed, which will be along the north elevation shown here. These are the existing conditions of the east and south elevations. The applicant is proposing landscaping along both elevations and will also be described in the coming slides. So the proposed site improvements include site and ground sign landscaping, deck and HVAC screening, and a tread replacement at the front door stoop. And to fulfill a condition of approval from the October 2022 minor project review application, the applicant is required to provide underside deck screening and landscaping, and the proposed improvements this evening before you are fulfilling this condition with this application. Due to limited space between the approved deck and the existing sidewalk on the north elevation, a wire trellis system is proposed to screen the underside of the deck, and then Boston ivy will be growing up the trellis. The front door stoop was deteriorating and was removed prior to ARB approval due to safety concerns. And so the applicant is proposing to replace that stoop with a new stone tread that is compatible with the building's stone color. All code and guideline requirements are met with conditions of approval, which address minor details needed on the site plan and or just need to be field verified on the site. So here we have the north and east elevations, which provide a closer look at the proposed trellis, which is highlighted here in red. The asphalt of the existing parking lot does terminate at the building foundation, thus making it difficult to incorporate any building foundation plantings along this east elevation. And to provide as many plantings as possible along the rear elevation, staff is recommending that the applicant provide plantings at the base of this deck in front of the trellis, since there is an 18-inch offset from the rear of the building, and that's indicated by this blue arrow just for reference. And this will allow for additional room for plantings at the base of the deck. Lastly, ARB has approved similar trellises throughout the district, including those seen at 38 West Bridge Street, as well as the Columbus Metropolitan Library Garage. So the proposed materials for the front door tread and the trellis are shown here. The ARB was provided with the opportunity to view the stone sample in advance of the meeting, just for everyone's reference. And with that, all minor project review criteria is either met with conditions or not applicable. And planning recommends approval of the minor project with 5 conditions. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicants are in attendance this evening. Thank you.
Any initial questions? Okay, I have a general question. When we require screening, because we don't see a lot of commercial projects come before us like this, do we have some accommodation for growth of the plants? Meaning the percentage of screening new versus the ultimate goal for screening?
I am not sure I'm understanding the
Here's my
question.
point. If you have 100% screening now, that's not ideal for plant growth. So it's good for blocking the view, but then how do your plants grow? So that's some communities actually do have a percentage of initial opacity, and I was just curious how we handle that.
The code and guidelines don't have a recommended or required opacity percentage. I would defer to the applicant to expand upon whether they will know how much this will fully screen the underside of the deck, but in terms from a code perspective or guidelines, there's no physical requirement for that.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I can add a little bit more clarity to that. I think Screening shrubs and ornamental grasses need to be at least 24 inches tall at installation so that they are, for example, with an HVAC unit, they are well on their way to screening that. We also have a zoning inspector that reviews all of these projects. His specialty is landscaping. He's got a horticultural and a design background. So he is looking at this from a sense of what is the maximum screening while also balancing out how is this going to look and perform at full growth. So we strike that good balance.
So internally, you'll evaluate that when you see the submission?
When they are installed,
Okay.
we will double check that. He will go out and inspect all of this, but we are also evaluating these landscape plans with those goals in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would the applicants like to make a presentation? Your name and address, please.
Brandon Dubinsky, live at 5420 Muirfield Court, Dublin, Ohio. I guess to address a couple of things that you're asking, and I see on one of the conditions here, you know, the goal here for us is, you know, to make this property as beautiful as we can. That being said, can you pull up the front elevation, for example?
So I do not have a front elevation, but I could
Or a photo would be fine.
photo, okay.
Yeah. So you see that in the front elevation, for example, you know, the windows, I'm going to guess those are probably 24 to 30 inches, you know, at the base of the window. So in regards to planting and sizing of what we plan on doing, in order to meet the code that's required as well, we're going to put 24-inch, or we've, you know, said that we're going to put 24-inch boxwoods with some hydrangeas behind that to be cut down. Obviously, we don't want to block our view from the interior, so we're not, you know, trying to plant something that's going to be, you know, high and intrusive to, you know, our view to the beautiful, you know, street that we get to look out at every day. So hopefully that helps address that a little bit. And that's our plan. I will say on one of the notes, a little bit hesitant about in regards to the staff comments in regards to this. I think if you look at the HVAC screening, one of the notes that was laid out for us, or the planning recommendation, was that the HVAC units be fully screened to the top of the units. With the plants that we chose here, that's going to be a bit of a challenge right off the bat, because as we know, those HVAC units are probably closer to 36 to 42 inches in height. So if we come out with a 24, we're going to be under that. So we might need to change the coniferous, is that the right word? Bush that we choose to screen the HVAC units with, but we're happy to do so to accommodate that. That was something that came after the submission.
Yeah, I wanted to, because you made a slightly different comment a moment ago, Sarah, when you mentioned 24 inches initially not completely covering the unit, but anticipating it would cover the unit, which is a little different than what the staff report says.
We will confirm in the field what is installed, and we feel confident, given the review that our zoning inspector has done, plus Taylor's work, that these plants will perform as required by the code.
Well, should we strike that? Is that, I don't have the conditions in front of me. If that's a condition and initially it's not going to meet that condition, then we should either change the wording of the condition, fully screened to the top of the units by evergreens, So,
I mean, the intent is that we fully screen them, or, you know, they grow to fully screen them.
Right.
However, I don't think the boxwood that we've presented to you is, we would be able to plant, you know, significant enough size to let it,
no, I'm
you know,
bringing
grow
this
and
up
prosper.
because I'm trying to be sensitive to
Yeah,
your
appreciate it.
request and your comment. So, um,
If-
because it sounds like your goal would be met eventually with the plan that's proposed. So should we change that language? So we'll be in time fully screened, or how, because
Maybe
his-
planted with shrubbery or whatever, evergreens that are expected to grow.
That's right,
tall enough to
because I think his reading and my initial reading of it was the same thing, that you expected, that's why I brought that initial question up, that you expected the screening right away. So I think the language maybe should be clarified, because it sounds like we're all comfortable with what he's proposing.
I guess I would recommend that we keep it as it is, and then it can be dealt with in the field according to what the code requires. And my understanding is that we plant at 24 inches. We know it's going to grow. We allow that to happen. And
Sorry. The way this appears to be written, it's expected to be as tall as the unit is right now.
Yeah, so if I may, the intent behind the condition of approval was, like, staff didn't get the clarity during plan review, that the proposed plantings would fully screen the HVAC units, and that our zoning inspector would later verify that in the field to ensure that they are screened, and if not, we could take, you know, such actions to make sure that plantings are modified administratively by staff to ensure that they are fully screened with an appropriate plant species. But if it suits the board, I can add some additional language here. So in green, I have added in time. And then if the board is amenable to that, I can strike out when planting is installed, so that right in time, the evergreens are screening the top of the units to be field verified by staff at building permitting.
That would be my concerns is, does it meet yours, Sarah? In time is vague, not that we know how fast a plant is going to grow, but.
I am very confident with our code requirements and our zoning inspector and the intent of what we're trying to do. So I feel that that is just fine.
Are you okay with that change?
I am, yep.
How about the other four conditions? Have you read through those? Are you okay with those?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think, Taylor, you clarified it for me. Number 4, just being the east elevation. My concern was the north elevation, there wasn't going to be room. The east elevation, we can certainly add something there to help out with. I guess we should all keep in mind we have 18 inches to work with. So I want to be mindful. We'll do our best efforts to put something there, and hope that, you know, it gets the proper irrigation and sunlight to grow as it should. But we'll do our best efforts to do it. I just, listen, I'm plants are living things and I can't live for them, so.
And that was just to
Generally
provide
okay with everything else.
to provide additional clarity. That was also the intent behind that, is right, this item for additional grasses or suitable plantings would be provided along the base of the deck on the east elevation, if room is permitting of a plant species to be able to thrive within those 18 inches. And if it was determined by the zoning inspector that that was not doable, then, you know, we could forgo that requirement.
It is the 18-inch from the edge of the deck to the edge of the building,
That is correct.
because because it looks like the actual screen is set back past the edge of the deck. So when you look at that east elevation, the actual space that you'll have will be greater than 18 inches because that screen is
Yeah,
behind.
the intent with the screening is actually to secure it, create a perimeter that secures it to, for the bottom, secured to the deck. So it will actually be in line. So I think we'll have the 18 inches. I think the way that it was accentuated on the plan was just to show that there's something going to be there. If that answers your question, but
Yeah, maybe the east elevation wasn't drawn correctly because when the east elevation shows that plane actually of your screen back behind the edge of the deck. So that's why I thought, but that's fine. I mean, I think you're comfortable with the condition.
I am.
You'll do your best to put something there. Yeah. Did we have any public comment on this case?
We did not.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minor project with the 5 conditions?
So moved.
As amended.
Yes, as amended, the 5 conditions as amended.
Second.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Ms. Damasser.
Yes.
thank you. Okay. Case number 2, 87th South High Street. This is an informal review. The application is a request for restoration and a rear addition to a historic 2-story building on a 0.11 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is approximately 150 feet northwest of the intersection with Penny Hill Lane. Ms. Singh will be our presenter. Roddy, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you and good evening. This is a request for informal review for 87 South High Street. Site here can be seen in yellow. It is located west of South High Street and north of Penny Hill. It is a 0.11 acre site with 30 feet frontage on the South High Street. Site is located within the Historic District South. It is the same district towards north, south, and east of the site, and historic residential on the west side. While the existing use of the building is commercial, it was originally designed as a residential building. Owners wish to convert the site now to a personal residence and is requesting an addition to the rear of the existing structure. There is a case history for this project. In January 2021, ARB did provide an informal review and feedback, and the board provided some changes to that, details of which are included in the staff planning report. The applicant has incorporated the changes and it is requesting for another feedback. These are the existing conditions of the site. On the left is the front of the rear east elevations, which faces the South High Street. It is a Greek Revival vernacular architectural building built during the 1840s. It is a front gable with 2-room deep structure and is listed as a contributing structure in the historic and the cultural assessment. There is a decorative lentil frieze, which is seen in the front, which probably was added on later. On the right is the southeast elevation with neighboring properties, which shows some Victorian architecture. These are the rear photos of the existing site conditions. There is an detached building located to it, which is the well house. The applicant is proposing to relocate it. Both the photos show the ADA access on the adjacent property, which is on the 91 South High Street, which has the access from the 87 South High Street. These are some more photos. On the left, we can see the view of the brick chimney, which is located in the well house. The applicant is proposing to deconstruct and reconstruct using the same bricks. On the right, we can see the shared parking lot to the rear of the property. There is a cross-access easement, which were present earlier, but later it was removed in 2017. This is the proposed site plan. On the right, which is just highlighted, we see the existing building. The applicant is proposing to restore the structure with required renovations. The star here shows the location of the current well house, which will be deconstructed, and the material from the red brick chimney will be saved. The well house is proposed to be reconstructed between the proposed connector or the breezeway, which will connect the two buildings. There will also be a reconstructed vent chimney using the old bricks. The connector is proposed to be glass on the both sides. The well from the well house will be located near the proposed water feature in the courtyard. The narrow connector has a small footprint and between which connects the old and the new addition. On the extreme left is the proposed two-story residential addition with two-car garage facing the mill lane. There will be waivers required for the area maximum as it exceeds the maximum building footprint. It is, however, within the permissible lot coverage. These are the elevations. This is the front elevation and the west elevation. The front elevation is actually the historic elevation. It will remain unchanged, and every effort will be taken to preserve the pedestrian interaction. The new porch and new railing will be added along with the windows, which will be replaced in the same existing pattern. On the west is the rear elevation, which faces the mill lane and will have the garage access. It can be seen that the existing roof pitch is 8 by 12. However, the new roof pitch will be 3 by 12, and this is to accommodate the second floor living. A waiver will be required again to support the new roof pitch. These are the north and the south elevations. Both the elevations has a front gable facing the South High Street and the front gable facing the mill lane. The portion here in yellow is the new construction, which is added onto the existing building. The new construction is proposed as a board and batten siding with window openings as a similar grid as to the existing structure. The south elevation shows the glass connector. I'll just go back. Yes, the south elevation shows the glass connectors between the new and the old. On the south elevation on the left-hand side is the new construction. And it also shows the red brick chimney, which will be reconstructed. The shed dormer windows can be seen on the second floor of the proposed addition. These are some isometric views which show the massing of the historic structure and the proposed addition from the northwest and the southwest. These are some further more isometrics which shows the view looking towards the southeast. On the right, we can see the view inside the courtyard, which is proposed to be an open courtyard with a glass connector. And it also shows the restored water pump, which is just located next to the water feature. With this, staff has some questions for the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Applicant is in attendance today. Thank you.
Any initial clarifying questions?
Maybe just wondering, I mean, so right now, from the code standpoint, the addition will be roughly 2,000 square feet. I mean, with both floors. And right now, the code is going to express 1,800 as a maximum.
Yes.
And just from a waiver standpoint, I think in the past we have gone up 20% in certain areas.
We can only go
up 20%.
which means this could only be at 2160 for us to approve.
Right. Yeah. So I just want to say, from a waiver standpoint, 20% is the maximum waiver.
Yes. So each individual building cannot exceed 1,800 and a total cannot exceed 3,000 at the max.
Right.
So we would require a waiver for both of that.
But can we have a waiver for more than that? Right. Yeah.
And to be fair, just the applicants may have been in the audience when we did the conceptual review for their neighbors, is we did indicate during that meeting that we were open to considering the 20% waiver and increase for that structure. So we have discussed that with similar projects in the past.
Right. It would have to be two separate structures to end up at the 3,000. Essentially, they'd have to be detached.
No, you couldn't have, I don't think you could have two on, that would probably be another issue.
You can have two structures, but no structure can be over 1,800 square feet. And then you've got your lot coverage that is a separate item that needs to be met. And then if you use just the single structure at 1,800 square feet, you could have 120% of that by the board's.
Correct. But you could have two if you stayed under total 3,000, two separate buildings.
Yes.
The way I read the code. So
So we don't have issues with an accessory structure and what's primary and what's accessory.
So the primary is the existing structure.
But well, I think we'd want to explore, because there's usually a primary structure and any other structure on that lot. That's if it was separated. That's if it was
correct,
separated.
yeah.
Then is there a qualification for how big an accessory structure can be?
Yes.
So we did talk about it in the last meeting, and we called it as in the subordinate structure. And we looked up the definition of the subordinate structure. It does not talk about the size, that how big the subordinate structure can be. So we did not conclude, but we said that it could be bigger than what the primary structure is.
So I think just for clarifying, yep, okay. That's the only question I had.
If we have truly an accessory structure, it can be no larger than 25% of the primary structure's square footage. This
If
is
it was accessory.
if it's accessory, if it is detached.
We're talking about hypotheticals
Yes,
here,
exactly.
so maybe
We are.
we won't deal with this issue.
But because of the breezeway, this is not considered accessory.
Building.
All one
That
building.
is
Okay.
correct. This is
That's fine.
one structure.
So we don't have to
Mhm.
worry about the accessory limitations. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, would the applicants like to step forward?
Brad Schock. I live at 6800 McNeil Drive in Dublin. I am the architect for the project.
Okay, do you want to tell us anything about the project?
This project's been before you, as you recall before, and the applicant and my client is interested in, obviously, I should say obviously, but in looking to address comments that were made previously. The building is currently a live-work building, and they're eventually looking to make it their primary residence. But the building currently would not serve well as being a primary residence. It's an old building. It was built in the 1850s, as I think you probably have seen in some of the history of it. So the solution we have now, one of the primary, call it, comments that was taken away from the previous meeting was about the existing shed on the back of the property, or the rear of the property. An effort to try and make a reference, and actually now to play it up as a primary feature of the project. One of the comments that was made in the previous review of this project is that perhaps simply relocating the shed would give it its proper importance on the property, but allow you then to make the project more usable. And so we took advantage of that idea, and now have made it, as I said, a kind of a very important, critical part of connecting what we're calling Old Dublin with New Dublin. And so we like the idea of referring to it as the well house. It used to house a water pump. We like the idea of playing up the idea of water, as you can see in the courtyard, by including a water feature. And the intent was, of course, to your point a moment ago, to try and keep the size and scale of this, what we're going to call subordinate building, similar to the primary building, but distinguish it enough so it doesn't feel like a near miss. And so at least hopefully it helps you understand why we selected board and batten versus siding, which is on the existing building. And the roof forms, of course, are different enough or distinguished enough that we think it pays proper respect to the primary building, but establishes itself to an extent as well as it would need to. Beyond that, happy to answer any questions you have.
Maybe just I have a few. Just I'll start just in no particular order here. So the what does it, for you? What does it mean to relocate that the shed? Are you going to take it board for board and
We really are. Pardon me. The existing shed is in tired condition, to be honest. It is a wood horizontal clad building. It's been painted over several times. The doors and the windows are both very tired as well. And so our intent is to try and be respectful of that existing building and recapture as much as we can. We can certainly recapture the brickwork that created what is effectively a flue from a heating device that was probably used to cook food, back in the 1800s out of the primary building. So ideally, we know we can at least reuse the brickwork. The objective is to try and reuse the siding as best we can. The real trick, I think, is going to be in trying to save the existing doors and windows in that current shed. I think they are probably
I want
very
you to clarify for the board members, because it appears that you've changed the direction of the gable.
Yes.
And
have.
so you've changed the fenestration, the window and door pattern.
I'm sorry?
You've changed the window and door pattern on it.
Yes.
So essentially it has a different appearance.
Well, it will.
Not just by location.
Yeah, I think, I don't disagree that you're right. It will take on a different appearance. The intent is to make reference to what was a historic structure on a different place on the lot. And I think it would be interpreted that way based on its distinguishing materials from the other materials that are around it, especially that wonderful light, window clad breezeway on either side of it.
And the reason not leaving it on the other side, so just incorporating where it is.
That's right. It really is. It's in a very awkward position, unfortunately, for making it usable in some way. Yeah.
Because of how it connects to the existing building.
That's it. Yeah. And unfortunately, truthfully, the existing building has this curious, as you probably know, shed roof on the back, a portion of which is heated and cooled space, and portion of which is a deck. And connecting those two and making those two roof forms play nice with each other really also presents a very, very difficult challenge.
Okay. I'll just keep going. No,
Yeah.
just go. So you want anything on that? Okay. And for me, just now I'm working from the back to the front. So the dormers on the new construction.
Yes.
So kind of give me your thoughts about, okay, from a pitch, they don't conform. And then those dormers, for me, if I look at them, they look more industrial. If I were to use a word there, they look less historic than they do more in a modern kind of configuration.
We went back and forth quite a bit on the shape of the dormers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't think I'm over speaking to say, if we're being asked to reconsider the shape of the dormer, we would give that some consideration. What we like about the current configuration, frankly, is it is simple, it is clean. It is intended to try and distinguish itself from what we're calling the primary building. And it is there, as you've suggested, to make the second floor of this building, frankly, functional, right? There is no second floor to the primary building. As much as it has the height to have provided that nothing is used there, it is an attic space.
Yeah. I mean, for me, if I look at that, it looks to me, you're making that so you have a usable second floor.
That's
right.
exactly
I mean, the dormers are there to give space.
That's correct. That is exactly correct. Yes. Yeah. The usable space on that second floor without the dormers becomes, you're right, something that's 4 or 5 feet wide. That's exactly
Well,
unusable.
there are other ways to address that.
That's the first questions I have there. Yeah.
Do we have any public comment?
No, we don't.
Okay, should we just,
Well, maybe just one more quick, just because you're aware. You're aware of the footprint restriction.
Yes, sir.
Or let's say the building. I'll call footprint first. I don't know,
That's
like
right.
living or floor space constriction.
Yes.
So for me, because it's if you just do the math, it's around 1,000 feet over. I mean, just square feet over from a floor space standpoint. If I read the code correctly. Yep. Because right now it's saying from the livable space should be 1,800, one building. And right now you're going to be roughly 3,000, give plus or minus.
You're right. You're right. We are requesting relief from that, I suppose, as part of this project. We were looking at as you just pointed out, a lot coverage barrier more than
the building cover barrier is going to be your bigger barrier.
Yeah, because
the lot coverage isn't an issue.
Restriction, right?
Yeah.
And we can't give you more than 20% relief.
Right.
Yeah. So from a code perspective, we won't be able to give a waiver more than that. Is the way, just if I'm looking from the city perspective here, that the maximum floor plan will be allowed to be, I don't know, give or take 21 something, between 2,100 and 2,200.
2160, something like that.
Yeah.
Forgive me, this is obviously news to our team, so it's not something that had been pointed out to us previously.
Okay, so the total built-up area would be 3,000 square feet. Currently, the existing building is approximately 1,050 or 1,090.
Yeah.
And the proposed addition is approximately 2,200. So the addition, ideally, the addition should be 1,800 and we can give 20% waiver on that. So that would be approximately 360 plus 1,800, so around.
No,
That's
no.
not the way I read. So we just have to clarify, because
So total would be 3,000, yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to do that math, so.
Yeah, you have to total in the building cover. If you connect it, and that's what Sean's getting at earlier, if you connect it, it's one building. So we already count the 1860 of the existing building in what you're allowed, and you can only go 20% over.
yeah, so that's the code restriction will give you 2,200.
Correct.
Give or take.
Right, so as I understand, I think what you're saying is you're going to get 300 square feet if you connect anything to this building as an approvable from this board's process.
The maximum is 18.
At the most, and that's actually based on a accommodation, for a 20% overage.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you look at different strategies. Like, the connector is a really great idea, and it's nice creating that space, but that's adding square footage. So, you have to begin to think about, other strategies for developing the parcel. Or Sean's, I don't know how a family can operate in two separate buildings.
So,
But that would be a way, and that's how, the little office building further south was able to accomplish what they did. It's two separate buildings. So, your concept is really a challenge.
yeah, you're gonna have you're gonna have a hard code restriction.
Right. Yes. No. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. The barrier seems to me is whether we're calling it attached or whether we are doing something to literally separate it and call it two separate buildings. I mean, that's it. It seems to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because right now I think I don't think we have a way to.
I mean,
to approve the square footage because it's attached.
Right.
This is it may not make sense in this market, but if the connection was underground, because then you wouldn't be, if the connection is underground, it's still connected. It's a lot harder to accomplish in construction. I don't know if that would even work.
Then are you going to get into the accessory building limitations? Which can only be 25% of the primary. So one or the other has to be considered the primary, and then the other one can only be 25%. So that would significantly drop the size of the house down.
Correct.
Correct.
So you're better off connecting it.
Well,
But somehow dropping, I don't know how many square feet they have to drop, but
Yeah, if you could connect it and stack the 2 stories, that would reduce your footprint at the ground floor, but.
Right.
We'd have to make the other one the main building.
So what's the maximum with the waiver that they can have on that lot?
It's 20% over the 1,800, and we haven't done that math yet,
Okay.
but that looks like 360 square feet.
That's what my calculations.
Yeah,
60, give or take.
yeah,
From
Of the whole building
correct.
or just the addition?
The whole building, the total square footage.
That is the footprint of the whole.
Right, I
So
understand
if you,
Okay, because you're saying in the report, it's it's 3,000 plus is what they're proposing.
Yeah, if
Okay.
it's detached, so it cannot be over 1,800.
well, in the report, there's some references to building or to lot coverage, which is a little confusing.
That's a different concept.
It's a different issue with lot coverage versus building coverage, because their calculation for lot coverage, it's fine. But most lots have a lot more pavement. So
Right.
like the drive is really short here, so there's not a lot of pavement. So
Right.
most lots have a lot of pavement. So
the way I see this is livable square feet, not ground coverage. That's the way I read this. So-
Right,
You're
ground
looking at
coverage
building- you're looking at
includes
building
other
coverage.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, ground coverage, they're okay, I thought,
Yes,
but
they
it's
are.
the, right, your livable square feet, the footprint of the buildings.
Building, yeah. And we can talk, we should talk about the other issues too, because, I mean, your concept's probably going to have to change because we can't help you beyond the 20%. So let's go on to the other issues too, because, if you're still, hopefully you're still considering something. How do we feel about the well house?
I think we talked before, I mean, I'm not opposed, having the connection you're putting in there, I see the connection. I like how the old and the new, taking it down and putting it back up. I might have to see a little more detail just to see how it looks, because certainly, as Gary said, it will be a completely different building when you do that. So it just, I'm not fully opposed to moving it, but certainly accessory buildings, we don't want to take down.
Well, and it's not just moving it. Moving it was, I think, what some of us had in mind when
Yeah.
we said incorporating it. But what's unique about these outbuildings is they're isolated. They're smaller structures than the structure they're supporting. They're clearly secondary. They're out on their own. So the historic character, what makes it unique, as soon as you take it apart and integrate it, the historic character has been compromised in a number of ways. So I think as a board, it would be difficult to support, even if we could get beyond the other hurdles, the way you're treating that structure. Moving it would be fine. Giving it another use is fine. But its identity of why we value that is disappeared. By the way, I think you've incorporated in the structure.
Because if you moved it, it would be a demo, I think, right? It would be a demo and a rebuild.
If
more or less.
it's wood frame,
Yeah, be a demo. So,
we've moved bigger wood frame buildings. The chimney would go, the masonry of the chimney probably goes, but there are ways to move wood frame structures. So it could be moved on the site. But
But you're right, in a way, it becomes, I was just looking at the elevations, almost subservient to the breezeway. And it no longer is a freestanding well house, which is what made it unique and what made it historic. Now it's a different, it gives your breezeway variety and makes the breezeway interesting, but that's not the historic purpose of the well house. So yeah, I'm not sure that I like it as just variety for a breezeway.
The third item is the mass and scale of the home and its response to guidelines.
it's hard to say now because it's going to be too big, right? So, I mean, I don't know what to say about it because I think you have to make it, it'll have to be changed somehow. I mean, from a personal standpoint, just how tall it is, the board and batten, the way it sits somehow made it look, I mean, just on the picture made it look really tall especially from the back. So somehow maybe in the future to soften how the lines on that look quite big from, if you're just going to look at it, just kind of runs up to the sky. So that was the first thing I noticed when I saw that, but otherwise from the scale, I don't see anything with the scale that would make it, would cause me any issue, except for it just may not fit in the code. Or it doesn't, well, let's say it doesn't fit in the code, yeah.
The actual square footage doesn't,
Correct.
I mean, the footprint, right?
The footprint fits, but how big it's going to have to be to sit there won't fit because there's going to be too many square feet.
Right.
Yes, not from a footprint.
Which actually leads me to believe they're going to build another story, which they can't do, but
What's that?
they'd build another story to get the room that they need if they cut the house down, but they can't do that. Just how I feel, how it looks now, I'm actually not opposed to it. I don't think it's that massive. The roof pitch lines look odd to me, and that's a different issue.
Yeah, I could even see, because it's set so far back, it being slightly taller. But what's
Yeah.
unusual is the shed dormer.
Yes.
Our code is written about traditional architectural forms and vernacular architectural forms. And so, and so we try, even though we allow some flexibility, a shed dormer like that is not a vernacular architectural form. And looking at your section, if your section is drawn accurately, you could still have those rooms up there. And you could either have multiple dormers, or you could have a much smaller, if the one photograph in your concept presentation of the office building that was done south, if you look at their shed dormer, it's about 3 windows wide. And it's not, and it's appropriately sized to the mass of the house. But the shed dormer, the way you employed the shed dormer does not look like a vernacular building element. So it's pretty unusual. And steeper pitch too would help you get a little bit more floor space and or not floor space, but headroom. And maybe the shed dormer could be reduced. But to me, I wasn't concerned so much about the height, but just the dormer is really unusual.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Which with that shed dormer that creates a flatter roof, it's just not appropriate for that area of town.
Because I think, as Gary said, you could go taller a little bit because you can't see it from when you go to the street. You'll
Yeah.
never see that. You'll never
Right.
see that. Even if you go to the full 25 feet or 20,
Yeah.
whatever the full, I wouldn't be upset about that because you won't see it. Yeah.
I agree. And multiple dormers would look appropriate. It's done throughout that whole area.
Yeah, as I said, we've investigated, well, again, there's going to be, I think, fairly substantial shift in what we're going to come back with, presuming we come back. But we've looked at, you're right, there's a variety of ways in which we can treat those dormers, I'm sure, that would satisfy the board.
We've talked a little bit about number 5. I think, well, the shed dormer addresses 4, the roof pitch, because we've all had, if it was a smaller shed dormer, I think from what I'm hearing, we would be okay with a waiver on the pitch for a smaller shed dormer. I think there,
Because eventually you're just going to run out of width too. You're going to run into an issue at some point. But I think you go a little taller and we find some wiggle room in there. There could be a way to get there that would would still look good. Huh?
And number 5, the architectural character and the details of the home.
It's okay. I thought the fixing of the front look of the new porch on the front, I think is a good improvement, and that'll make it look quite a bit. That will improve the front of the building, and the rest of it, I think the things we talked about. There's a few things on maybe how the board and batten fits together, and just kind of how it looks from the back. But otherwise, I didn't have other than what we've talked about, and I didn't have any other comments.
Hillary, you're shaking your head. It looks like you're.
No,
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't have many. I think this is just a preliminary review. So details like how that brick wall is finished, there's probably a cap on that brick wall. It's just doesn't come up and stop. One question, why stone on one side of the structure and brick on the other? Questions about sort of continuity, material use in different locations, but with a board and batten, our architectural consultant suggested, I think in some of her notes, ways of maybe breaking those long walls up a little bit more, possibly. But the bigger issues for me are the form, being a vernacular structure, and we talked about the well house. Do you have any additional questions for us?
My owner may, just a minute.
My name's Tom Hospel on 9995 Allen Drive, Dublin, Ohio, owner of this property. And first of all, thank you for reviewing this. And I guess I want to go back to the size of the addition, the secondary, subsidiary, whatever we're going to call it. It's a really important part of this project, as you can imagine. And number one, I guess my question to you is that there has been, Mr. Cotter, there's been some discussion about 20%, but yet that's maybe still flexible. There's a potential waiver. You said you've been up to 20%, but that was,
The code says you can have 1,800.
Yes.
And we can give a waiver to plus 120% of that,
okay,
but above,
Not, you can add 20%. You can't add 120 to that. You can add 20%.
well, 120% is 20%, but yeah,
Well, you said you could add 120. So that-
multiply by 120%. But yes,
Okay.
you can add 20% more onto that. So get you to
To-
20.
to the primary structure.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So the total square footage can go from 1,800 to 2,160, give or take.
Okay.
Yep.
And so I guess my point of clarification then is if we connect the back part to, with a breezeway, which seems obvious to most individuals that that's what needs to take place as opposed to an underground passageway, you're saying that the maximum size of that back, according to code, can only be 3,600 square feet? I'm
Well-
sorry, 360 square feet?
Well, we don't know if you're at 18, you're not at
No,
1,800
you're only
now.
at 1,000 right now. So I think the primary building now is 1,000.
Yeah, so you can add 1,160 square feet.
Yeah.
And when I looked at it before, it's just some nick and tuck. I don't think it's when I looked at your numbers on your, if you put that first plan up and you look at the numbers, I think you could get there because the front of the building is so small. Yeah, so look, your building in the back is only 160. You're at 1,000 plus in the front. So you can get there. It's just with this concept, it's just going to take adjustments.
But you don't have the second floor in there.
The second floor doesn't count in the coverage.
Yeah, second floor is not.
We're talking building cover. The second
Talking
floor,
about coverage, and there it said about square
we're
feet.
talking about
Coverage.
building, not development cover. This is the cover of the building. So it doesn't impact, I mean, we could approve him to go in 10 stories if it made in the architectural review, because it's about building, if it didn't have other zoning issues.
Yeah.
It's just about footprint. So you're not that far off. You can get there. So I wouldn't feel, you may want to reduce the courtyard a little bit. And maybe you just moved the pump house out to the back, closer to the alley, so you have more open space there or something. But I think when I was looking at your plan earlier today, I don't think we're telling you need to scrap this plan or concept to get there.
I think, no, I think we need to be, now we have to be really clear, because right now here it says that the maximum building footprint, and it's not so that it's is it square foot of built on the ground, or is it square foot of living area?
Touching the ground, yes.
Touching the ground.
Touching the ground, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, well,
And that's
So,
standard.
The addition
throughout
can be
all-
no more than 1,360 by my calculation. Am I right? Okay,
The addition can be a little over, the existing building is 1,091
right.
square feet.
So it'd be less than 1,360.
Yeah, so he's got between that and 2,160. She. everybody.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And they're at 2,000 now.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, so you'd have to take out 700 feet,
But-
square feet, yeah.
No, they'd only have to take out, if you add the 1,160, you add the 1,091 and add the 190. That's all that goes into this number. So you just add those three numbers and look at the difference between that and 2,160. I think you can make it work.
that's 24.
Yeah, some of the rooms may get a little bit smaller. Maybe you reduce the size of the connector. You almost, the other,
So you're saying that with that 120% or the additional 20%, however, whatever math that works out, the maximum square foot combined is 2,160?
Correct.
Yeah,
we want to preserve the pump house, but maybe it's preserved on another site. then you get that 190 back. I mean, I would start looking at creative solutions like that because I think you can get there with what you have, still have the 2 bedrooms up. I mean, I think there are ways to keep your concept and get in this number.
If we were to expand the size of the primary residence,
It's based on a percentage of the lot size. So so it doesn't matter how big each one of those is because it's a percentage of the lot size. So the only way you could get that number up is if you bought some adjacent property. And that's a whole.
But I mean, but square foot, it's 21 is the maximum you can have on the ground.
2160, yeah.
Yeah, right, that's
then
what I
you
got.
Driveways, no, so I have to admit, I confused a little bit.
The driveway doesn't
It's-
matter to this
It's the
calculation.
report, we need to make those distinctions really clear about
Mhm.
building and development cover.
Right. Development cover is a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so driveway doesn't count to the 2160. Driveway does count for the other number.
Porch either.
I'm sorry?
The porch is out also.
Correct. No, porch.
It's out. I think.
Okay, so it's living space.
Yes.
Think of it, yeah, it's just living space. That's what we're talking about. 2160 of living space.
Question, as we go through this, and we've been for an informal review in January of 21, and this was not brought to our attention as we were going through this and proposed it. Also, in the pre-planning meetings, this was also not brought up.
The square footage
Yeah.
limitation?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you and your architect should be, should be
But there's
responsible
comments,
for the
but
code.
there's comments that come back as far as code and planning and things along those lines, correct? That people will point out to you.
But it's
as
not
you
their
present
job.
plans.
I don't want to get into this, but you're,
I guess I'm just curious about what sort of feedback we can expect as we continue to try to go through this so that, you can imagine there's been a lot of planning and costs to get to this point so that we, don't continue to come here and have our feet pulled out from underneath us. This is a pretty significant thing.
Yeah, I can't speak to what, I mean, I know last time this came before, there were a lot of issues about the architecture.
Yeah.
And I know, and I'm glad you came back because but there are a lot of issues, and I know that a lot of that meeting was spent talking about the architecture.
Right.
Not talking so much about, in fact, I don't remember any comments about areas during that meeting. I just remember a lot of comments about the architecture. So I can't speak to what you were told with the staff, but it's, and I'm not going to blame anybody, but it's a part of the code. And, the first thing we do is we review the code.
I guess if I could ask the committees a little bit of indulgence. I see 1160 as the square footage of our, call it secondary building for the moment, and 190 for the breezeway, and 1091 for the main building. So I add those together, I'm at 2442. 2160, it sounds like it's the number that we think is the max allowed. So we're roughly 280 or so square feet away from where we could be, or what we would need to find to make this work. So I think we'll be able to give that some thought and whether or not that can, what significance that will have to what, the enthusiasm is for the project. But I was also interested to hear a comment you made about moving the well house off-site.
Well, we have a historical society in Dublin. What I'm trying to do is, like, there's a log cabin that was discovered on another property. And it was rebuilt on,
Arts Council land.
so what I'm trying to do is find ways of not penalizing your applicant for square footage because if you treat it the way we think you should treat it,
Yes.
it's not going to contribute to your livable space.
Well,
So-
and so I'm encouraged by what you're
So my
suggesting. Yeah,
point
just wasn't
is-
aware this was an available option.
My point is, if you could donate it,
Mhm.
And it's something that would need to be negotiated, but there's still an ability to preserve it because it is a challenge because you're penalized for, you lose 190 square feet that you really can't, it's pretty difficult to use. I mean, there are ways it could be attached, but it's going to block the view. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. You'll have
Well, I
to-
like it.
you'd have to see if there was
I'm
but-
encouraged to know
But
that.
I think you're still going to need to nip and tuck the design, not a lot, but you're going to need to nip and tuck the design to get the areas down.
Yeah. Forgive me, perhaps you don't know the answer. Who do we even begin the conversation with about potentially relocating a historic structure somewhere else?
We have, unfortunately, our member who's on the Historic Society of Dublin's not here tonight, so
That's right. We will follow up with staff. I'm sure we can find an answer if we decide to go that way.
I'm trying to help you get the number down.
Yeah. So it's,
Just to add, we talked a little bit about design elements and the architecture. 2 board members are missing. So when this finally does come from a vote, you haven't heard from them on this particular design. Just be aware of that. We may say things are fine and cool and we like that, but there are 2 other members.
I am supremely confident we will dazzle you with our next.
But none of us can do anything about giving you
Right.
more than the 20%.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're good?
All good? Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you for the information.
Okay. Case number 3. Riverview Village at 40 East Bridge Street. This is an informal review. Houses on Riverview Street. The application is a request for a walkable commercial village of mixed-use development in the north section of the Historic District on a 2.5 acre multi-parcel site currently zoned Historic District, Historic Residential, and Historic District, Historic Public. The site is located northeast of the intersection of North Blacksmith Lane and East Bridge Street. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Board. This is indeed Riverview Village, an informal review for this project. The location is on both sides of North Riverview Street, north of East Bridge Street, as shown on the map here. These properties were purchased by the city in early 2021 for redevelopment possibilities. Taking a look at the zoning, and I'm going to go through a number of different topics from the broadest down to the most specific. So we'll start with zoning, which is a very important part of this project. The applicant will request rezoning to historic core. The core is adjacent to the properties to the west, shown in brown. The current properties that are historic residential are on the west side in purple, and then historic public is shown on the east side in green. And this rezoning could meet the vision of the community plan. Taking a closer look at what this rezoning might mean, this table compares the existing zoning in blue to the requested zoning in peach. And I want to be very clear tonight that we're not examining rezoning as something that is on this docket. It is merely understanding that the applicant would want to rezone in order to make this project happen. We aren't to that stage yet. But the notable differences include a big increase in lot size from the residential to the core zones. Although the existing lots are indeed legal, any new lots that would be created would have to conform to that minimum lot size requirement. There would be a large increase in lot coverage over the residential zone, and that would apply for new construction. That's not the case with the 2 parcels that are currently zoned public. There's a slight increase in building height over residential, which would again apply for new construction. There's no limit on the maximum building footprint over the residential, and that does allow for more expansion and additions with this project. Note also that the front and side setbacks are allowed to be 0 feet, again allowing additional expansion and additions. And finally, the rear setbacks in the core zone are permitted to be only 5 feet for both building and pavement, again allowing for more expansion and additions. Taking a look at the existing conditions, this view shows the elevations of the houses along North Riverview Street, starting from the south at what's technically 40 East Bridge Street. Wing Hill Lane is in the middle at the break point between the 2 strips of photos there. 62 North Riverview is on the east side of the street, and that's shown individually. That's the red house. And then the other property adjacent to 62 is vacant land. This is the view along North Riverview Street. This is actually facing Bridge Street and the pedestrian underpass. You'll note the carport in the background. This board approved demolition for that carport last month. Wing Hill Lane comes in from the right, and then the river and the steep slope are off to the left. Taking a look at the outbuildings along North Blacksmith Lane, again, starting from 40 East Bridge Street at the south. That particular photo shows I'll call it a duplex privy that is shared between the 2 properties there and the significant wall system as it meets Bridge Street. And we're going to talk about this in just a moment. With this request as it's currently thought about, these outbuildings may need to be demolished. That is one of the items that we've requested some feedback on tonight. This graphic shows the rights of way in the yellow dashes. And as you can see, the outbuildings along North Blacksmith appear to either be in the right of way or very near the right of way. Obviously, this will have to be surveyed in the near future should the project move forward. The applicant is proposing to use right-of-way for on-street parking. Perhaps additional right-of-way would have to be obtained from the city. But regardless, there are going to be impacts on these buildings. And again, we would request your feedback on that. The historic stone walls in the area play a big part in this neighborhood's character, and you can see from our wall inventory the site outlined again in yellow and the walls that are within that project site. We have one on the west side of the street shown in the upper photo, and then one on the east side of the street shown in the lower photo. And that has had some significant deterioration just due to gravity and time. Moving on to the proposal itself, we have 2 options that the applicant has presented. One is a minimum density in order to make the project work, and one is a maximum density, perhaps from their standpoint, a best case scenario. So we're going to take a look at the minimum density proposal first. And we see parking on Blacksmith with the idea that perhaps that alley would be converted to one-way and the direction is to be determined. We see pedestrian access coming down Wing Hill Lane. There's a new office building proposed at approximately 10,400 square feet. That is on the currently vacant lot that sits south of 62 North Riverview. There's a potential for the South 3 properties to be removed from the project. If that were to happen, perhaps those could stay zoned residential. That's a little bit up in the air right now, but comment on that would be welcome. At number 62, we see the addition of decks and outdoor eating areas for some kind of restaurant or outdoor venue. There's also the potential to remove number 53. We're requesting for some feedback on that as well. The applicant has said that they feel that this is the most difficult to renovate due to the low ceiling heights in that building. And then finally, we see the addition of new outbuildings that would replace the existing outbuildings. Next, we move on to the maximum density proposal, and this has the same features except for 4 additional buildings, which I'll point out along with some zoning commentary. Building number 1 is an addition to 40 East Bridge. The maximum lot coverage would have to be met, and as we saw on that table graphic, the maximum would be 85% with the historic core zoning. It's currently 45%. Building number 2 is an addition onto 17 North Riverview. Again, we would have some lot coverage concerns potentially, and we would not be able to attach across lot lines. So that would have to somehow be dealt with. Building number 3 is an addition to 37 North Riverview, and we have the same lot coverage questions. And finally, building 4 is a new structure located between 45 and 53 North Riverview. If we rezone to core, the minimum lot sizes are going to be 21,000 square feet. So that does not appear to be a viable option. And we can probably guess that the setbacks could be fairly tricky to meet as well. Moving on to proposed character and a little bit more of the vision details that the applicants provided. Here we'll start with the entry point at North and North Riverview Streets. And we see 62 North Riverview in the background, still is the red building. And then the new Cohatch office building, that 10,400 square foot one, is shown directly to its right. And for a little bit of character suggestion, we're seeing some vertical siding and some offset gables. Moving into the site a little bit, this is viewing down North Riverview as you kind of turn the corner, and now we're looking straight down North Riverview. Note the preserved historic walls. The Cohatch building here is on the far left. It's just visible in the sketch. And we have restored houses and bricked pavement. And you'll note from in the staff report that vehicular access needs to be maintained. Now we're at the end of the project, the south end of the project, and we're looking kind of back north from 40 East Bridge. And again, we see historic walls restored, outdoor activities, and a pedestrian focus. And finally, this is a proposed view from the Link Bridge, using 62 North Riverview as a restaurant with outdoor decks. There's a public stairway located on the right side in the graphic. And in the background, we see the original Cohatch building and the intersection entryway from North Street. So we have a number of detailed questions for discussion tonight. These are all in your planning report, and I am happy to answer any questions.
It's very complicated. Any initial questions for Sarah? I'm sure we're going to have, more. Mr. Davis, would you like to, and any members of your team?
You need me to say my name and address and stuff? Yeah.
Please.
Matt Davis, 4620 Hickory Rock Drive, Powell, Ohio. And then
Tim Lai, 401 West Town Street, Columbus.
So, thank you, Sarah. I mean, I think she did a fantastic job going over a super complicated project. Just for a little context, we submitted this proposal last July-ish, I think, in specific response to an RFP laid out by the city with very specific requirements for that RFP to make it a walkable district, highly community engaging, interfacing with the park, maker spaces, all kinds of things. Our team worked really hard with it during that 2-month period to put this together. So by no means is this something that it's an informal review because we want to get a lot of input, and by no means is this a buildable, it's still conceptual at this point, but we don't want to head down the path of a lot of concepts without input. It is highly complex. We've had probably a half dozen meetings with city planning, fire, street, I mean, all the departments, not too many to name, in trying to figure out safety, driving paths down a one-way to actually creating drivable streets on Blacksmith Lane, connecting it to Main Street. We're very flexible, and I'd say 70, 80% by actually the proposal that we put in there. There's some things we're very we must have in order to kind of move forward with it. I think by far, in order to restore all those houses and to create this cohesive, walkable district, could be a landmark for the city of Dublin that everyone will want to be a part of. That's kind of the vision for what we're trying to do with it, between restaurant, additional office, co-working, small businesses, maker spaces, workshops. CCAD is already on board with doing some workshops in it as well. To me, the most important part to make this project what it should be is the view from the Link Bridge. I think that there's very few things that are historic when you walk across that bridge. I think the North High building is one of them we're very proud of. The Coach building won several awards that we worked with you guys on. And I think that red house, I'm terrible street addresses, 62 North, is actually very sister-like to the North High building. I think staging that and having an entrance from the bridge that welcomes people. And there's several renderings that show coming off the Link Bridge behind No Soliciting down to that walkable area. It also doesn't show the park that's actually would need to connect everything together through it. And I think that for us, in order to start with creating a really beautiful entrance that make people go there, the hardest part of the project, you need to have enough critical mass and desirability for people to want to go there. There's very little parking. So you make people go to different parking spots. That's why we're trying to get some parking on the Blacksmith Lane side. It's very difficult to get it on the other North Riverview side. We even proposed going down North Riverview behind the current Oscars on the street, making additional street parking down by the park to make that more welcoming. We have to have some parking. So we're trying to battle the parking requirements with the lack of parking, with one-way streets, with roads, with all this other stuff. So hence, highly complex. I think the least complicated part of the product, to be honest with you, we actually propose pretty basic high-end restorations. So there's some additions in between them, but we're very willing to restore things like they are. I think the new office building on the cliff on the river is kind of a must for us in order to make the project feasible. Since we proposed this, the interest rate's up 3.5%, and it needs a certain economic help to make it happen anyway. So for me, my biggest thing for you is there's some very big unknowns to this. I think the 53 North Riverview house is almost unusable for me, and I'm pretty creative. So it's 6.5-foot ceilings. It's very small. It's all chopped up, and everything's going to have to be ripped off, new roof pitches and everything to make it walkable. And then you're left with a really small footprint. It's the least useful building there. So I'm open to your opinion. It's actually I don't think it contributes much either based on the architecture. So I'm open to your thoughts on doing that. We actually propose saving it with some sort of southern restaurant concept, which would be highly seasonal and a little bit flaky, if you ask me. It'll be kind of tough to pull off. And then also, what else? The density piece obviously is the most controversial thing for you, probably. I mean, it's one of the most, or how much buildings you want inside of it, which there's this give and take between density, critical mass, vibrancy, activity, and architecture. So on one hand, the less you build, the less it costs, but the less traffic you're going to have to get, which goes against the RFP of why you asked for it the first time. So there's all this tug of war with the whole thing. So I'd love to, I mean, Tim and Tim Lai, architecture, be on board with us as well as our design team. Hopefully there's not a question of the quality of stuff we're going to try to build if we do it. So I'm more interested, less on the specific details and more about the massing, the size, and the openness of the 53 North Riverview. So
That's maybe, overall, I think it looks, there's a lot of good things in that. So don't take all the stuff we'll probably say as a negative thing either.
Well, let's ask them questions now, because
Yeah.
I think we have some members of the public who
But
want to make
Do have
comments. and then we'll-
one qualify, because you said you have a few musts. The office was one. I mean, you gave us a couple musts. So are there a couple others you say in your mind, hey, I got to have this?
that
Or is
the
the
red
office- is
cabin
office-
/ decks, vibrancy, active cabin area, like that red house, if you go to that view, like
I
go to
know.
that view,
Yep,
like that
yep.
view is to me the must. Like you have to create that in the office build, the Coach office building is why I'm doing it. I'm not a village developer. I own Coach, and we're a Coach developer who builds things. So without that, I can't. It's hard
Okay.
for me to do
So
certain
62, the anchor plus the office building are the things that really,
Yeah.
for you, make the space.
Yeah,
for
and
you.
the rest were as can just the last piece of it is imagine those houses right behind the current Cohatch. A lot of them we have a demand for restoring into, like, call them mini corporate headquarters of small businesses that could run their office out of those spaces. The houses at the end, which could stay residential, which this whole thing used to be zoned historic core and just recently became residential, I believe, right? So residential, it could stay that way. Our concept is that, imagine, like, the best way I could describe it is a parade of homes, a permanent parade of homes, where everything was perfectly restored inside out to just beautiful things. But everything everything inside of it, it was for sale from local makers, cabinetry people. And if you ever wanted to do a home remodel, you would go to those places, take a tour, hopefully with a drink or something going through entertainment wise, and you'd meet your local interior designer, you'd meet your maker who would do your cabinetry, you'd meet your maker, you'd buy that coffee table, and it'd be experienced, and you'd have woodworking and other crafts behind it. So that's kind of so it'd be a constant seasonal thing that could go, because people do a lot of renovation in the winter, right? In the summer, you do vibrancy and looking at things. So that's all part of this whole concept. And yeah, so did I answer any? Was there some other question I didn't answer?
No, that was for me. Just if you had two or three things you said, I have to have this, or I'm going to struggle to move forward. It's good to make.
I think you need to move forward from the front to the back.
Yep.
It needs to be cohesive too. Like you notice, like, to me, it does not work at all disjointed. It needs to be like the correct signage, like a village, a destination, a thing. If it's disjointed, it's miserable. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
We'll have more questions as we work
Okay.
through, the 7 different items. Tim, did you want to add something, or did you want? Okay.
You want me to stand here or sit?
Oh, you can sit down. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable with. Is there anyone from the public who wants to speak to this?
Good evening. My name is Scott Herring. I live at 3280 Lilymar Court on the other side of the river. Boy, I'm glad I came tonight. I thought that when I clicked on the minutes of this meeting, that one of the things was going to be the applicant, the city, asking permission to wrap the roofs with roofing felt. And I've not heard anything of that. Am I at the right place?
That was the last meeting.
And what happened on
That
that?
was our last meeting. We approved that because we wanted to mothball the buildings.
I see. So, but very interesting to hear case number 2 and great discussion about the density on the lot and the total massing and square footage, and I did not realize that there was any thoughts of this area being rezoned. I'm here because on Sunday I was walking across the old bridge and I stopped and looked I noticed the deteriorated condition of that 40 East Bridge Street house. I didn't even realize that actually had a Bridge Street address, so that was something I learned. I saw the sign of public hearing and scanned the code, and it took me to that, so I must have clicked. That was a memo. But boy, I'll have to keep up with city council, because if there's a rezoning, my goodness. So I walked for the first time in 25 years I lived in Dublin. I walked down this street and I thought, how quaint, cute little houses. And then after reading that memo, the city owns these, a proposal, I thought, wow, maybe these will just be restored each. So I get a little nervous about the density and medium plan and the dense plan, and let's build out these lots 85%. Well, I don't know. In my opinion, that would spoil the character of this street if this has been individual houses for so many decades. But it sounds all very much conjecture, because until it's zoned, a lot of this couldn't happen. So I'll stick with city council and see what happens on the zoning front. Sounds like that's really the greater question here.
Yeah, and I think the city's in a position because the market doesn't appear to support these as single-family homes. So there needs to be another way of looking at this area.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, no other public, and nothing came in online.
No, it did not.
Okay, okay. Well, let's start from the top. Let's just go down the list, and is there support for the proposed design concept?
Yes, I think it's great.
I would say yes. I mean, it's in the details, right? But I think
Yeah.
doing something with that area is super important, because yeah, it's more or less dying or dead now in a certain sense.
Yeah, I think ever since they closed the bridge, making that a part of a residential community is very, very difficult.
Yep.
So I'm proposed generally the plan too. We'll talk about the details, but yeah, so it's clear those of us present are very comfortable with it.
Yep.
Okay, do we support the rezoning from historic residential and public to historic core? And do we support that? There are two approaches that have been discussed. So we only rezone certain properties that way, and we keep the properties closest to Bridge Street in their current zoning, or we zone it all one way.
It's kind of a difficult question to ask without a few more details. I mean, certainly I think what you have having it all rezoned, I think is a way forward. As you say, if we keep it as it is, and from a residential standpoint, I think it's also it's a difficult spot. I don't know how you will see if you want to do, let's say, a multi-family house, or if there's some other iteration that could come out of that. I'm certainly in favor. I could support rezoning it, and I think I would take a broader view and say rezone it all. But as you come back and there's another case for doing something else, could be. But I would say rezone it all and try to make it one fabric of one thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not sure how viable those two houses are going to be anyway.
Yeah.
For the same reason, for the reasons that you just said, they're small, they're old. I did have one question for Sarah. What is, pardon my naivete, what is historic public? What is that zoning?
That is a zone category for things like schools, cemeteries, parks, and it's a nice catch-all for those kinds of public facilities.
Okay, right. So that would not be appropriate for this plan. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, you need something that supports the business aspect. So
One of the benefits, I think, to rezoning the whole parcel is you get better coverage numbers. And we were talking about the coverage issue with the house before, because I'm thinking about that parking too. And if there's a way to get more parking, I know it's questionable how you use Blacksmith Lane, but having more coverage options would allow for either more building
Right.
or
Something
more
else.
parking. So I think by changing the zoning, we give them the
Yeah.
opportunity for more coverage and not having to seek variances.
Keep in mind all this historic, another complicated, there's a bunch of historic walls on North Riverview that you
Yeah,
can't touch, therefore that
yeah.
causes a parking dilemma.
Well, that and and what we do about the outbuildings. I realize they're complicating issues, but it just seems you have more flexibility if it's all zoned the same way.
Yeah, and the other option was some sort of modified development agreement where it was residential and historic core to provide future flexibility, but I'm okay with historic core and coming back if ever wanted to change something later. But the other thing to note is like the historic, public, is that right? I always do that wrong, but that was recent too. So the parks only own that for a solid 8 months. And I need to give part of it back to them either through some sort of deal what we did take the land, because that's all the public park, and it's actually in a floodplain. So it's kind of this weird thing in order to do that. So you actually build the front half, the bottom half would have to go back to the park so they could build the whole parking connector. And the current park plan is actually tearing down that red house, by the way, building a staircase. So I'm moving that staircase over the right to preserve that house.
I don't know if it's clear, but we probably, what the point Mr. Davis is making is this rezoning probably wouldn't cover that entire parcel that runs down to the river. It would cover where the office building wants to be. But there's got to be something worked out with the city about how that part of it remains park.
Some will be in the flood.
Part of it might have a private use. Okay, do we support now, the number that's given here, the 10,400 is not the building footprint, but it's the building's potential area on multiple floors, right?
Yes, literally.
After the last conversation, I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about.
It is, just so to be clear, that lot's this. Yeah. It's 1 story up above, the same roof pitch as the current stuff. It just happens to be walkout down here, so it's 2 stories of 5,000, roughly.
Okay.
It looks like 3 buildings, but it's 1 building. The Coach building has a jagged roof, right? So it was done. That's not the final design, put it that way. Just started playing with it.
I'm glad you said that. Okay. All right. Okay.
So the lot coverage is 5,000, give or take, something like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, right. So the 10.4 is not the footprint of the building. It's the total square footage of all 3.5 levels or whatever it's going to be. Yeah.
Well, it's just going to be
2. Okay. Yeah, then I'm in support of it. It's certainly not going to look massive from the street.
And are you okay where it's located close to the red house? You okay with?
I wasn't bothered by it.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I think the red house.
I'm just trying to
is-
give them as much feedback as we can.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. And obviously it'll depend on its final design, and how it looks.
Yeah, I'm fine with.
If it's a pure glass and steel high rise, I'm not going to like it right next to the red building, but.
Well, this gets into this a little bit. The next question does, but since we're trying to give them some feedback, there was some flexibility on, from where I see the reactions, and there was some flexibility on the design and the appearance of the cohatch. The board and staff didn't exhibit the same flexibility on the design of the recent office building across from the library. So just thinking hypothetically, this is not on High Street. So are we going to be open to more flexibility?
We have been. I mean, the ones that are back there, we've said there's some flexibility inside what the materials could be. So I think from a continuation of that, you could be. Yeah, I think steel and glass. I think there's a limit to what you want to see down there, but I think there's some flexibility that is different from if you're at the High Street versus being closer to the river. So I wouldn't have an issue with that. We've made some adjustments there.
Yeah, I would think so.
Within a reason.
Yeah, I don't want it to be too far off.
Well, the apartments, the apartments that are along there was some flexibility with too.
Right.
So I'm just trying to reduce time spent, review processes, so you have some
But
direction.
certainly you want it to integrate. I mean, there's going
Yeah.
to look like it somehow fits in the space, right?
Would we, if it looked, and this is, this is all part of 4, does it matter if it looks similar to the existing cohatch?
You're asking me if it should look like that?
The question is, would the board support the new office building to appear similar to the existing cohatch building?
You will be able to see the existing cohatch building from there, correct? So in a way, that would work because it would
Can I,
integrate
can I
the
add
whole area.
something to that question? So I think, in all honesty, I think the cohatch appearance, if you guys remember, it was a fairly specific reason why we designed it that way, including the slope, including some of the limitation of the site, and at that time we have to kind of address the one-story residential at the back, and the slope has to be a certain way. Whereas this would be a very different consideration. So, in my opinion, even though right now the inspiration image shows that it looks kind of like that, but I think that is simply just a placeholder right now, that at least to show, hey, it's a cohatch, but it probably would not look like what you see on North Street. So I don't think you need to, huh?
It'll appear one story from the
Right,
street.
exactly. So it's a very different consideration. That's what I mean by that. The original cohatch is like we have to come in with the 8A access from High Street, but then we go down one level when we get down to Blacksmith. So it has a lot of those side consideration, whereas this one is a completely different side consideration and the view and everything. So like you said, it would probably appears to be a one-story from Riverside. We may or may not have a pitch roof type, roof line, but we don't know yet at this point. So I think material palette, yes, we probably would want to find something that would, fit into the neighborhood like we always do. Does it have to be the same wood siding? Does it have to be the same stain? Maybe not, right? But for us, it's a cohatch, but it's a different building. So I don't think it needs to look like cohatch because it doesn't come from the same constraint and consideration. So that should not be a problem.
Okay.
We're all okay?
Okay,
Yep.
it doesn't have to. Yeah.
We're fine.
Yep.
We'll be flexible to
Okay.
answer Gary's question.
Okay. Sarah, could you put the others? Okay. These are a little trickier. Do we support the proposed infill building options for the location, scale, massing, and number? And there are two, aren't there two approaches there? There's one approach that's dense and one approach that's less dense. Is that right?
That's correct. So let me this is the minimum density one, and then we can go to the maximum density.
Sarah, I meant to ask you, what do those the black boxes mean?
That's me running out of time and copying, pasting, and putting a board around the image.
Thank you. Got it.
You're welcome.
So this is the one with limited density.
This is the minimum.
And then the one that had the green on the infill buildings was the one with the maximum density.
So to be clear, this minimum density one was built around the holy crap, things are expensive to build right now plan. So we started minimizing the square footage to try to get the same functions, which is the concept is you'd keep it villagey. Can you go back to the other one? And you'd build, to be clear, this is not a restoration of those outbuildings. They're unsalvageable, rotted outbuildings. So, and in order to make the street work at all for drive traffic and that turn, the road has to be wide, which means they can't stay there anyway. So therefore, they would be new buildings that were fully air conditioned and furnished, made to look like outbuildings, which would be full workshop, meeting rooms, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they would look however we want them to look, but they would be 100% new. There is nothing salvageable from those buildings. And then the front on the far right, the 53 North, I believe, is depicting that it's if you want to welcome someone to a village, turning a building the current orientation and being small and condensed with no welcome is actually creating some sort of new structure that welcomes everyone in from the bridge to that village. And I just cut and paste. They don't represent anything other than small little new villagey builds, just to be clear.
Those are just going to be new, and you're going to put something. You're going to take the things that are there. You want to take the things that are
Detached.
down. Yep.
They're detached.
Mhm.
Yep.
Since we're a little slow to respond on this one, I guess I'll start. I'd support them both, but I like the one that's less dense because the fabric feels a little bit more like what's there. I mean, the space kind of migrates between the buildings, and it's a little bit closer to, when we talk about fabric, we're using the term of pattern, the patterns that the buildings create.
Mhm.
And so that pattern is a little closer to what was there and a little closer to what we see on the other side of Bridge Street. So it's closer to, they're big outbuildings. They're not the outbuildings that were there, but it's closer to that pattern that was there. But I wouldn't be opposed just on its appearance of the other one either. Because I think vibrancy of the community is, I mean, that you're really going to have to weigh. And if it's successful, you probably are going to expand. So I like this. We'll talk about the removal of buildings, I think, in a moment or two, but I could support either one.
Cool. I mean, my first is I was here because certainly I think, as Gary said, I might look at the minimum first and don't look from a cost standpoint because it's hard to say what will happen, right? Not from I'm here, what makerspace, what do these things look like in 5 years from now as you start to put this in there? And how do you make a real option in the future to say, okay, it's not this, it's that. The buildings you put are flexible and however that is. And then you have some flexibility to say, I want to put whatever the next thing is in there. So it feels like building it sensitive to how it could be infilled later. It feels like a better way just because it's hard to read what the future. So I feel like less dense moving to what the next thing could be feels better just because you don't know exactly what it is. You got to have enough stuff down there to make it vibrant, right? You got to get people to come, but then making sure you have it either in the initial plan, okay, I'm going to convert these things, or I'm going to be able to put something beside that is the next iteration. Instead of a makerspace, now I need a restaurant or
Sure.
whatever the thing would be. So it feels like that's the way to move, but somehow you have to be able to make a business. You have to make people want to come down. They have to put enough stuff in there. So I feel like minimum moving up would be a way to make sure you can ensure that whatever the next thing is vibrant in the future.
Sure.
I don't have anything. Actually, Sarah, could you move to the more dense picture? Yeah, I really don't have much to add to what the others have said. I agree that the original character is the less dense picture. This one really doesn't strike me as bad, and it would add to the vibrancy of the area also. So depending on how it all turns out, I think
Sure.
any range between the two of them would probably also be acceptable.
Cool. There's a hybrid too. Honestly, buildings 3 and 4, they're solely designed to make the other ones useful. So it's kind of like,
Certainly, if you have a question about some of those buildings that are there, can you make them
it
useful?
sounds like you're giving me flexibility. So that's all I needed to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. And
We're not locked into, it needs to be one way.
Right.
Right.
Sean, did you have
No, I'm just saying, because I mean, as we come back to some of the buildings that are, I mean, you think from, I don't remember the numbers, 40, 17, 27, 37, 45, the numbers, you think you can rehab them into something useful? And because I think eventually it comes back to if you say, oh, one of those I got to do something else with, just.
I think the only one, so for me, we're sold out of Cohatch and we have a wait list and I could fill stuff up. So the sleepier version becomes a little more like some of those cabins become a rentable office space for someone in a meeting room. And imagine what is not depicted on this plan is a level of landscaping and cobblestone walkways between everything to make it a walkable, enjoyable
Mhm.
thing. Imagine going out in the backyard of one of these houses with your team and having a meeting under a tree, that type of environment. The more dense you make it is the more vibrant, where you could actually have other uses in between them. So there is no use for the houses other than work and office environments for me until I expand them, hence the tug of war of things. See, yeah, that 53 North Street, I think I can't come up with a use for it. I really tried with that. That depicts like basically the inside of the house would be a full kitchen and you can't even go in it. And you just have an all outdoor seasonal thing. I just don't think I could make it. It's a stretch, to be honest with you, to make that profitable. It'd be cool for 4 or 5 months, but it wouldn't be probably profitable.
Since you brought, since you brought that up and that's on our list, I'll address that because I think we've covered the pattern. That's the one thing I'm probably, and I guess going through it again, I could be convinced, but that's the one I'm not as concerned with removing the outbuildings because your outbuildings it's too bad the applicant who was here on item 2 wasn't here because there's a clear difference between that outbuilding and the quality that is still and your outbuildings and the deterioration in your outbuildings. So I'm more comfortable removing those. I guess I still need a little bit more convincing on 53. Maybe it's another tour of that. Because if the whole goal of this is to preserve these houses.
Sure.
And we're even providing some flexibility to preserve the houses. So it just seems that, if that's our goal, maybe we think another way of using it or doing something else, or that's the one I'm just a little comfortable, but I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I think what would have to happen with that one is if you're giving me flexibility on the new build, it is impossible to use in this current form. It's literally 6'6" ceilings and it's 1,000 square feet with a small little footprint, right? Because you'd literally have to raise the gate. You have to redo the whole roof, make it look similar. But now I have to actually do an addition to that house in order to make it usable. So it could be a combination of two. I'm the last person who wants to tear anything down. I'm really trying. I also want it to not be vacant.
Sure,
once I redo it.
Yeah, I mean, so our goal is not to have it, you do something and then 3 years from now, we come back, or 5 years from now, we come back and you can't find anybody to use it. Now we're still.
Yeah, $1 million, 800 square foot house doesn't do anyone any good.
Right. You don't want that.
How do the two of you feel about the outbuildings and the demolition 53?
Yeah, and nobody said, other than that dual privy, whatever it was, nobody said anything about the historical importance of any of those outbuildings.
We know that at least one of them appears to be relocated from some other place based on its construction. Some of them are in really poor condition. I think that we've talked about privies before and the importance of those as unique elements. A duplex privy is a pretty rare thing, but I'm not sure. I mean, that's why we are asking the questions of you. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not in love with any of the outbuildings, and I do see the deteriorated.
The first two should be condemned for safety reasons.
Yeah, right.
They're still not. They're still up.
Yeah, they look like, when I was driving by for the last month, those outbuildings looked to be in pretty sad shape. I guess when you come with an application, we can talk about the historical importance of a duplex privy.
I mean, I don't know about but the other ones, I think you should take them down. If you walk up, some of them went yesterday, they came to look at them, they're in bad shape. The one on the N50, what did we say, 53? I think you have to come with I have to say, I could support that because I think that's the gateway in. If it doesn't work, you have a building that sits on the corner that is somehow not right. And I think that would for me, that would detract. So yeah, I mean, you have to come with the reason why it doesn't work, but certainly I think I could be convinced with a reason why it should be taken down, and that would be the gateway in somehow.
Part of that question 6 asks us about traffic on Blacksmith Lane, and I don't know if we are the body to even discuss that, since we're not traffic engineers. And I think that's going to be dictate. I think the stone walls, as you know, are important to us.
Yeah.
But I think that's the call. That's the city
Has to
engineer.
widen.
That's the end. Yeah, I saw the things about the fire truck access and, wanting proof of turns in certain locations. And I have a feeling that whatever the city staff tells us will work and won't work, we'll
I
probably.
can say honestly, with the city staff and parking, we've been on the same page the whole time. We're very flexible to meeting their requirement. To be honest with you, it's their land, they're dictating to me what they want, honestly, before we do something. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. You tell me what you need to do and what access you want and where you want it. I think a question for you is more important than the traffic, 'cause I think the city will dictate it to me, but I think one of the 3 critical pieces of this is that I'm going to try to establish a bridge connection from Bridge Street. Now you're going all the way up Blacksmith Lane to create this experience coming down, not Blacksmith Lane.
Riverside. Oh,
Coming down my street.
Yeah, from Wing Hill?
yeah.
Wing Hill Street, a physical connection. I want to come down. What is down there? It's some experience coming down a walkability path, and you have to establish from no soliciting. So we already got one from down Coach's side, North High down to Coach. We built that, right? Then you have one off the Link Bridge, but everyone has to go all the way around. So I already talked to Crawford, and then they're willing to look at bringing a bridge, like steps down from by no soliciting down to that area. You have to have those 3 access points, that in culmination with the park access. So really my question to you is, how do you, if taking this brand of Riverview Village and extending it to create a cohesive content up Wing Hill Lane, how do you feel about establishing that as a connection point physically? Light posts, the same lights, the same sidewalks, the same everything all the way down. Signage. It's in the renderings. I just didn't know if you got.
Yeah, no, I remember. That's what I'm remembering.
It's all in there.
Yeah, I remember.
I think it's great. It's only going to help the things on High Street.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. And that's, that part of High Street, part of it's the size of buildings and what they can accommodate, but is not particularly vibrant. So if you make a strong connection there, it helps both. It helps what's going on there, and it helps what you want to do. So I think it's,
You want people to
I
come
think
down.
all your connections make sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, the question's apt though, because it will change the nature of what's going on down there. Or not, I mean, of how it appears, as opposed to just haphazardly 1840s and 50s buildings being plopped in. Now you've got the same street lamps throughout, and it looks more development-like. But it looks good.
Yeah.
I like
Well, the
what
city's in charge, like in their proposal too. Like there is a street plan, so the streetscape is part of the city's responsibility. So again, it can't be half-assed. It's got to be to your standard or not, right? So it's like, to me, the streets and the standard and the sidewalks and everything needs to be top-notch with these beautiful restorations. That's kind of and so far we're all on the same page with it. Just throwing it out there, like we have to establish those connections and make it successful.
It's a very good question, I think.
Do you have any more questions for us?
Not really. You're much easier than I
Board
thought.
members, anything else? Looks like, Sarah?
Were there any more thoughts about the potential demolition of 53 North Riverview? Mr. Chairman, we heard from you. Were there any other member thoughts about that?
Personally, I mean, you have to come with, I mean, it's a demo, right? So you have to come, I mean, I say
Yes.
it's incumbent to come with the reason why it doesn't fit what we're trying to do. But for me, it's the gateway in. So it has to be appropriate. As we just said, the streetscape, all these things, we're going to make it very inviting. If you can't use that building to be inviting, you're going to have to do something. And I have to say from here, if you can't find a way to use it in an appropriate way, you have to find another use for that space, right?
I guess
So for me, I have to say, just sitting here, I could be convinced.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. here's an impossible question for you to answer. So like there's two of you missing.
What's that?
There's two of you missing.
Yes.
Yeah, and on this,
Right.
on this issue, we have slightly different
Oh, yeah.
points.
Yeah,
of view,
exactly. And I'm sure down this way
I'm not sure how
And then
Hillary
Sarah,
feels.
who was on the RFP committee? There was a member on the RFP committee. I'm going blank, right?
I'm sorry?
The RFP selection committee had a member of the ARB on it.
Yes, that was Mr. Alexander.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're the only one?
Mhm.
Okay, so my question is, when I come back, is this roughly the same opinion? Have
well,
have you guys discussed it at all internally?
I can't answer, you know, that's not.
I told you it's impossible for you to answer.
Just know they're missing
Mhm.
and they may or may not have different views.
But I think there are three people here who are clearly supporting
I agree. I
generally
just,
what you want to do. So I think if you're looking for a sense of how this board feels, I think the three of us who are supporting.
Yeah.
it.
But clearly there is a criterion to demo a contributing building, right? It's in the code. So you have to come with
I have been through that before.
Yeah, so you have to come with the reason why you would do it. So it's not just we need to do it
Cool.
because. Yep.
So low. I'll figure it out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Put so many notes on here.
Okay. All right. Last item is communications.
All right, I have a number of items to talk about, and the first is very exciting. This is a reinstitution of the commercial facade improvement program that took a hiatus in about 2020 for some reorganizational requirements to meet some legal things. But that is going to be, as I say, reinstituted on the 27th with the formation of the Commercial Improvement Corporation for the city. And this will re-up the facade improvement grant application process for properties within the historic district. And some highlights of that program is that each project or lot may receive up to a $25,000 maximum grant. Up to 50% of the eligible project, let's see, how do I want to say this? You can get up to $25,000 where that is up to 50% of your project cost. And sample eligible projects include uncovering and restoring historic facades, replacement of cornices, parapets, shutters, awnings and signs, site and landscape improvements, including historic walls, parking improvements and expansion, and that would be for things like paving, striping, ADA access, storefront restoration and renovation, window and door replacement, installation of lighting and upgrading existing external fixtures, and roof replacements when combined with additional facade improvements. So this is a very, very exciting program that will be handled through economic development, but I get to be a part of that, and this is great. If I could do cartwheels, I would.
Will those projects have to come before us, or are they, if it's just
Yes,
restoration?
they do. Yes, they do. And they would be approved by this Community Improvement Corporation, but then they would have to come and get the proper approvals before this board to make sure that everything is in keeping with both code and the guidelines. So, yeah, great opportunity. A second item I just wanted to bring to your attention, I got word from Parks and Recreation that they are rebuilding the perimeter stone wall around the cemetery, the main cemetery, along West Bridge and then around to the community church. Since this is maintenance and reconstruction, not using new materials, they do not have to come visit the board. But Sean did want to let you know so that there were no surprises.
They don't want us getting excited about somebody making an improvement without our approval.
Right, right. Part of this is they are going to make sure that the wall has a consistent elevation as it goes along the perimeter of the cemetery, which will look nice and crisp and clean. The entry columns will be spread out for easier access. And then this will be in a summertime frame, and there may be some sidewalk closures. There's very close distances between some of the walls and some of the graves, so they must work on the sidewalk side. So just FYI. Question for you. We have, over the past couple of months, we have put out for viewing at the city office large, heavy materials for landscape projects. Code says we need to get them. We are glad we get them because sometimes the colors are not as we expect and we match them to other materials on the site. We offer these for viewing, but I'm wondering, since we haven't gotten a lot of viewing traffic from the board members, how does everybody feel about just trusting staff to make that determination? Do we need to offer them up for individual viewing?
I feel good about trusting the staff.
Yeah, I do too. Certainly, today's been an example. I was not able to go to city office and view the sample, and
Sure.
clearly I trusted staff because
Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't go.
As long as there's a photo, and I think the photo, like of the piece of stone that we were talking about on the one project, and that the photos were good in the staff report, the photo of that, and then the steel system that they were using, and those photos are pretty descriptive.
Okay, all right, terrific. That's wonderful. Then we can sort of get these pieces out of our hallway, and again know that we are very diligent about matching colors and making sure that nothing strange is happening.
One suggestion, Sarah, would you still
Yes.
have them bring the samples to you?
We do.
Then what you might do, because I go by one of these houses we approved on Riverview, and I cannot believe the way the stone looks, and I can't believe we approved that stone. But what I was thinking is, if you set a date and said, okay, we have this in our office, and it's not in the hall. If anybody wants to see it, it's here. We're only going to have it for this amount of time. Either come and see, because I think sometimes it can be helpful. I think having the opportunity, if we know you have it and you're only going to have it for a certain period of time, and you could say somebody will be in the office from 1 to 3, and you can come in and see it. But I do think, I feel a couple of these, when I've gone out and looked at it, said, did we really approve that? So I do think maybe we do need a little more vigilance on some of the, not so much the landscape materials, pavers and things like that, but and some of the stones on the elevations.
I was thinking particularly about the landscape materials that are probably a majority of the time flat on the surface.
You're just going to do it for landscape materials and still bring in the building materials. Yeah.
And building materials, absolutely, we will do our best to bring them to you. If they are something that is, pretty big, we'll continue to let you know. And then I think on certain, we had one I know, Taylor, this was yours where you actually held up the proposed stone adjacent to an existing wall, just to show a difference in the color and give a little sense about what that's all about. So we will continue to do that with building materials. But I'm hearing that patio materials, residential landscape materials are okay. All right. Good. All right. Just wanted to make sure. And then finally for March, are all three of you going to be here in March?
Discovered tonight, my son is receiving an award at his high school that night, and parents are invited, and these things don't happen a lot. So I have to be there. So I unfortunately won't be able to be here.
So we will have, I know that Mr. Jewell is out. We will have Ms. Cooper.
I'll be here.
Mr. Cotter, you will be here. Ms. Damazer, you will be here. And it's on the 15th. Yep.
I know we changed that date because originally we thought 4 of us
Yeah.
would be able to make that. So
March is a tough month. All right.
The 15th, I should be here.
All right. Then we will have a quorum.
Okay.
I'll be here. I hope.
Okay.
All right.
Can I ask
That's-
just one last question for Sarah? Just
Yes,
because I have
sir.
to say somehow at the end of the square footage discussion, I was half befuddled. Because this will come up again, can we clarify porches too? Because we said the porch was out just on this last, could you next just come with clarifying what, when it says footprint, what is really in that? Just to make sure that when it, because the porch must be 100 square feet or something, right? It's going to come up as a,
We will clarify that.
because if it's build living area, you know, if you say living, then somebody's going to say, well, the garage, I don't live in the garage. I just want to make sure we don't get caught in this, because I have to admit, by the end of it was my fault. I got.
But every square foot counts.
On this one,
when
certainly
we're-
every square foot will
yes.
count. And if we say, we come back
Yes.
and say, no, the porch counts as buildable, then I just don't want to get caught in a spot where we're
Right.
not quite sure exactly what
We
we're trying
will-
to count.
Yeah,
Yep.
Rati, if you could make a note of that and help me remember, and
Yep.
we'll follow up with that tomorrow.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, happy to.
All right. We adjourned?
Adjourned.
We're adjourned. Let us know when we're off.